Maybe you're looking for that one gravel bike to rule them all, one that is both quick and sporty like a road bike, but can also be chilled out for those long endurance gravel events. Is the Otso Waheela C that gravel bike? Well, find out in this video. Welcome back, Pathless Peddlers, and if you're new to the channel, if you're into the non-competitive side of cycling, gravel exploring, riding party pace, you have found your people, hit that subscribe button. So if you're not familiar with the brand Otso, be sure to check out our live stream interview with one of the founders of the brand. They're a small company based out of Minneapolis, and they make everything from fat bikes to gravel bikes. The Waheela C is the carbon version of their Waheela gravel bike. And the really key feature of this bike are its massive tire clearances. You can run everything from 700 by 50 to 650 by 50 with lots of room to spare for that mud clearance when things get sloppy. This bike in particular was built around the 650B platform with head Ardennes wheels, Gravel King SK 650B by 50mm tires, and as you can see in the fork, plenty of room for mud clearance. This bike has all modern componentry, disc brakes, through axles. The controls in the cockpit are the new Shimano GRX, and the handlebars are finished off with the Wolf Tooth supple bar tape, which, like the name suggests, is super supple. Moving to the rear of the bike, you'll see two top tube mounts to put a top tube bag, as well as two sets of bottle cages on the inside of the triangle and a third one on the bottom. The drivetrain is set up 1x with a Shimano GRX rear derailleur, clearing an 11 to 46 tooth cassette. So pretty good range for riding unloaded when things get steep. And lastly, the saddle is an Otso branded WTB saddle. So enough of the boring stuff. How does the bike ride? The first word that came to mind when I was riding this bike was comfortable. Between the frame geometry, the really plush tires, and the carbon layup, the bike just felt like a perfect platform for all day riding. Typically, I'm not a fan of all carbon gravel bikes. You know, I appreciate their lightweight, but to me, generally, the ride feels just pretty stiff. But not so with the Otso Waheela C. I'm not exactly sure what's going on, but I felt like it was a little bit more supple than other carbon gravel bikes that I have ridden. In terms of the front end geometry, the trail number is in the low 70s. So what this translates to is a bike that steers predictably, that you don't have to micromanage, and is a confident descender when you're going downhill. It's a little bit higher than an endurance road bike trail in the front, but I think it makes perfect sense for the kind of riding that you're going to be doing with this bike. The trail is higher, but it's not so high that it weaves around the road on steep, slow climbs. It's still plenty responsive on paved descents, but gains a lot of confidence on rocky descents. In terms of the rear of the bike, this is where things got interesting. It does have their adjustable tuning chip system, so you can run it in a tuck position at 420 or a long position in 440. When it's set in the long position, it's plush but fast and is a awesome descending bike. When set to the shorter position, it takes on more of a road bike feel in the rear end, so really quick to accelerate, kind of fun and jumpy, but it does lose some of that stability when you're going down a rocky descent. So pretty interesting in that you basically have a road bike and a more slack gravel bike all in the same package. So what are the things I like and dislike about the bike? One big like is the bike generally seems to be a little bit more supple than other gravel bikes I have tried. I'm not exactly sure why, but I was expecting a somewhat stiffer ride because of the all carbon frame set, but that's not what I got. Not quite steel springiness, but there was some noticeable compliance in there. Another big like for me is the adjustable chainstay. I know not everyone is going to fully appreciate that. Many people may just set it on one setting and forget it. But as a bit of a bike geometry nerd, it was fun to play with it and basically have two bikes in one. And ultimately, I do think it fulfills that promise of being many bikes in one package. So that's what I like. What are the things I dislike about the bike? Probably the biggest dislike would be its lack of utility. So the fork is pretty stripped bare of any kind of mounting points. So no rack mounts, no adventure nipples, as well as the rear end. Yes, you can take this bike touring or bike packing, but you will have to adopt a completely rackless system. The website does say it has rack mounts, but I couldn't find them, so unless I'm completely missing them somehow, I'm not exactly sure where they are. The bike does thankfully have fender mounts, so if you want to ride it as a training bike or a commuting bike all winter, you can do so without a big wet stripe up your back. Another minor dislike is the adjustable chainstays. As much as I love playing with the geometry, it's not something you can really do trailside. Unlike a slider system where you can loosen bolts and shift everything backwards, you do have to pop out the flip chip, undo the brake, and reposition it. And all those things, while not the most complicated task, but definitely a little bit more than you would want to take on mid-ride. I don't think this is necessarily a deal breaker. I think for most people, they will find the setting that they like and basically leave the bike in that setting. So ultimately, I really enjoyed this bike and do highly recommend it. The only caveat being that it doesn't really have mounts to put things on the bike, but if that's not what you want to do, then it shouldn't be a problem. I do think it legitimately fulfills a promise of basically being two bikes in one. In the shorter setting, you would get what would be the equivalent of a Salsa Warroad, and in the longer setting, you get the equivalent of a Warbird. I think it's a distinct enough difference, having tested bikes and having ridden this bike in both settings back to back, I could tell a difference. If you're new to bikes or aren't as sensitive to those changes, and it might not even matter to you. But as a bit of a geometry nerd and a bike nerd, I do appreciate it. And I think it does what it says. So if you're looking for a bike that won't feel out of place on those quick roadie group rides, or a bike that you can chill out for events like Dirty Kansas or take on a lightweight bike packing trip, then this is definitely a bike to check out. If you're still curious about this long chainstay versus short chainstay thing, we made a video just about that, so be sure to check it out over here somewhere. If you have any questions about this bike, leave those in the comments below. And as always, keep the supple side down.